Here in 2025, we have seen a ton of competition for the small-sized e-moto market. However, we have not seen very much competition for the mid-sized e-moto market. Now we have seen quite a few incredible brands come out of the woodwork with their bikes that they currently have in process, getting ready to be tested, like the Benell 805 and the 902, which I have very high expectations for, as well as the Dust Moto. We've seen that bike for a while now, and it is getting closer and closer to being ready. All of those bikes are not due until the end of this year, whereas the bike that is next up in line is one produced by a manufacturer that is no stranger to producing electric motorcycles, and that would be the Zero XE. Now, I don't want to bore you guys with specs, but I do want to get into quite a few different features of this bike and briefly touch those specs. If there's anything that you guys want to see more in depth, it is on our website, so go ahead and check that out at www.chargedcycleworks.com. But to dive into things, this has got a 74 volt, 58 amp hour battery, which is 4.3 kilowatt hours. This is a swappable battery, which we all know is super crucial and important, especially if you're in any sort of racing situation. Having a swappable battery is so necessary. This bike is a 15.5 kilowatt bike, which is roughly 20 horsepower. And for the trails, that is a lot of power. That is plenty. I think it's gonna be in a pretty good place out here. Another really awesome feature is that this bike comes from the factory with 1821 wheels. We have been asking the market to do this for so long. It is a standard in the traditional moto industry. It needs to be a standard in the electric moto industry, and Zero has made the decision to go ahead and put 1821s on this bike. One thing I will say is the tires that come on this bike are not very good, so we went ahead and replaced the tires on this so that I'm not sitting here testing this bike and complaining about traction the entire time, but tires are an easy change to make. Having the right wheels to begin with is very, very important. Something quite interesting about this bike is the suspension on it. Now, I have yet to test the suspension, but it does look pretty quality to begin with. One thing that's really interesting though is the dimensions of it. The front fork has got 210 millimeters of travel with a wheel travel of 220 millimeters, which on a mid-sized bike is a little bit on the shorter range. And the rear end of the bike has got a very interesting setup with an 85 millimeter travel rear shock, although the shock itself is quite large, but that is because the way that they have it going to the linkage and the swing arm allows for 248 millimeters of travel out of this rear end. So although the suspension to me seems like it's set up a little bit interesting, I do think that this bike is going to be balanced pretty well with the way that they have it working. And good news is I've already seen brands like Cirrus come and put their suspension onto this machine and be developing that. And we all know how good Cirrus suspension is from testing it on the Sur on Ultra B and a couple of the small size bikes that they are working on. So I'm really not worried about how this suspension is from the factory, but I am excited to test it as it sits in this bone stock form. A super common question that gets asked on these bikes is, what is the weight? Zero claims that the weight is 223 pounds. We have yet to put it on a scale. However, I'm sure it probably sits right around that looking at it. And a primary reason for that is this bike is gearbox driven. So unlike the Ultra B that has a jack shaft and a primary belt with a secondary chain going to the rear wheel, this bike has got a gearbox, very robust, very strong, and that usually creates very smooth power as well when it's tuned correctly. So although you get a little bit more weight out of a machine like this, I think the gearbox itself is going to compensate for that weight, and you might not even feel it. This is an electric bike and it's got plenty of power to make up for that. They've also got the full length seat. I love seeing a full length seat on electric motos. And moving up to the front end of the bike, there are a ton of functions within the display and the handlebar controls. This bike has got a very intuitive display, and once you turn it on, you'll see everything power up. Currently, my kill switch is active. If I go ahead and turn that off, the bike will be in park. If I squeeze the brakes, the bike will go into ready mode and it will be good to go. There are 3 modes on the bike. It is currently in standard. If I click the mode button, it goes to sport, and then I can click it over to eco. So you've got 3 different power levels to flick through there. You've got a trip on one side and an odometer on the other. On the right side hand controls, I've got my kill switch. A new feature that we have never seen on one of these electric dirt bikes is a cruise control button. If I turn this on, it will actually hold this bike at a specific speed, which is quite a cool feature. Not something you often see in off-road bikes. There's a really good reason for that, but if you ever put a street legal kit onto this bike, it at least has that feature. And over here you have also got your mode selector to be able to determine the eco, standard, and sport mode. If you move over to this side of the display, you have got your traction control here. If that is turned on, there will be no light. If you turn it off, it will show that light crossed out. Now there is a big menu button here. In order for me to get into that menu, I gotta make sure that the bike is in park, and I can go ahead and click into it. Currently it's showing ride. If I hold down the set button, it'll take me over to my tilt sensor. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off, and to do so, I just hold down the set button. Then I can scroll on to the next one. There's an uphill assist mode. You can choose your regen level from 1 to 3. I'm gonna keep it at 1. You can choose your charging power from 1 to 3. It's currently at 2. Then if I click the menu button, it takes me back out. I can go and click set and change the theme. If I want to change the theme from currently dark over to light, I can do that. And then it looks completely different for you. I can change the brightness of this screen from 1 to 5. I can change the units from miles to kilometers. I can change the language into many different languages. I'm gonna keep it in English. You've got a menu that shows what kind of faults may occur on this bike. Currently the bike has no faults. That's always a good sign. You can change the time. You can also change it from a 12-hour time frame to a 24-hour, which is quite nice. In the system menu, it will show you the different software versions and firmware versions on the bike, and then you can reset all the settings if you would like to. Currently on the bike, there's a hazards button. There are no blinkers on this bike, so that button doesn't work. But between your traction control, the menu, the set button, and the park, you've got all the adjustability for this menu system here. Moving over to the left side controls, I've got my light switch here. The bike constantly has a running light on, but I can change it over to brights if I want to. There's also a trigger on the front here that allows me to flash the brights if I would like to. The left-hand control also has blinkers. This bike does not have any blinkers wired up to it, so this currently is non-functional, and there is a horn on this bike. Now I know you guys are probably tired of me talking and excited to see this bike actually riding, so let's get geared up, let's get out on the trail. We are in the beautiful mountains of Utah, and I'm excited to see what this bike can do. All right, my first ride on the Zero XE. Really excited for this. We got a huge group here with us today. It's gonna be pretty sweet. Even got a pretty sweet unicycle over there. It's gonna be badass to watch ride, but I'm excited to get out and actually try this for the first time. All right, first ride out here on the Zero XE. Going through a little bit of rock gardens. Gotta say the bottom end on this bike feels super powerful, but also super smooth. I'm really actually quite happy with that delivery, although my top end just now topped out quite quick. This bike corners quite well. It is a little bit light on the steering. That's something I might work on adjusting soon, but as of right now, it's very nimble, but the steering radius isn't as good as I would like. I've actually already hit the bump stops a couple of times on this bike. Unexpectedly, made it hard to turn, especially at low speed. Come through a little water. But man, that torque is unbelievable. Roll up this real quick. Oh, that's cool. Man, that throttle delivery on the bottom is just so manageable. The top end's where it lacks, and the foot pegs are already lacking a little bit as well. But the torque, there is no lacking in torque at all. And it is manageable, easy to climb this hill. That's a really steep loose hill, zero problems. So just sitting on this bike in the parking lot, I felt like the foot pegs were a bit high and the bars were a bit low, but actually riding it, I feel like it's in a pretty good position for, you know, where the weight sits of this bike.
Makes it pretty easy to stay over the front end, which is always a good sign. When you're sitting down, it works quite well. I would still probably change the handlebars on this, just because the bend has got a weird sweep in my opinion, but I really would not change much else. I'm really, really glad the tires are done. That was very necessary. But aside from that, man, this bike out of the box is feeling quite good. Especially the brakes, man. Zero, absolutely zero complaints about the brakes. Zero complaints about the noise. The bike is quite quiet. Power, the delivery's good. I'm only in standard mode. I don't feel like I need any more than that out here on this trail, although you betcha I'm gonna try it. There's a solid like 20 dudes right behind me.
Hey, it's Scott. How's it going?
Good,
luck,
Brett.
brother.
No, I know who you are.
Oh.
You don't know?
Western Single Track.
Oh my god, dude. Hey. Shit.
What's up?
What are you doing?
Group ride.
Oh,
Doing
that's
some
right.
cleanup.
I forgot you guys
Nice,
did have a
dude.
group ride tonight.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to ride my electric bike.
That's okay. I see how you are.
I know who you are too.
Yeah, everybody knows Scott.
Yeah.
Come on.
What's up, dudes?
Yeah.
He's famous.
Man.
Okay, I'll let you go by.
All
All right,
right.
man. We'll see you.
Good seeing you.
That's sick. That guy does a ton of trail maintenance out here. Super cool to see him. Back to the review. So standard mode, I think, is set at a really, really, really good place for trail riding. Throttle is super manageable. I know I've said that quite a few times already, but it is. I will say, I noticed that the weight on this bike sits high, although it corners very well, and they balance this bike well suspension wise, and I haven't seen the suspension really get, you know, used majorly on this trail yet, but it does feel way better than most stock bikes already. Between the suspension and power and brakes, I've just got a lot of good to say immediately riding it. I wasn't expecting to have this much good to say just looking at, you know, where the weight sits and a couple of other things, but I really gotta say that just getting on it and riding has changed my mind drastically. The bike feels strong and sturdy, unlike other bikes that feel like they come apart on you pretty easily. This one just chugs along no problem, and I really think I can put it through its paces too. And you know, even beyond that, I've seen it put through its paces from other people like Tucker with Electric Cycle Rider. The Zero Race team has been putting a crazy amount of time testing not only this bike but upgrades like suspension, and you know, doing a lot of racing. I raced against them in the last race that I did, which was a complete mutter and real test of bikes, and the Zero team did awesome. You know, I think like this bike, especially for it being a first rendition, these guys actually care. They care to test and put it through its paces, and you know, you can definitely tell. Now, something I do need to mention is I'm not instantly comfortable on this bike. It feels a little foreign. It's got features to it that are a little odd. The foot peg position, the handlebar bend, the foot pegs themselves are not great, so I'm sliding off of them. But there's two things that I'm really struggling with the most right now, and it's the turning radius as well as the feeling of the chassis in my boots. Now, I'm hitting a lot of points that are just catching my boots really weird, making it hard to stand up, making it hard to squeeze and sit down. And you know, I'm not a big fan of that. I really need good contact points to be able to push a bike hard. So that's something I definitely want to talk to Zero about. The good thing about this bike right now as it sits is it is a prototype. It is not production. There's a lot that can still be changed, and we'll see how they do with all that. But really, the bike out of the box is quite exceptional, and the price point of it there's no denying the bike that you're getting for the price you are spending. Now guys, those are just my very initial impressions of the bike so far. I think give me some more seat time, let me get a better feel for this, and I'll update you guys shortly.
On today's ride. Well guys, I gotta say, I am very glad I got to get some seat time in on the all new Zero XE. I'm impressed by this bike overall. I think the pros by far outweigh the cons. Every single bike in this market has its cons. There are no perfect bikes out there, and I think this bike has got a lot going for it to make it a really good ride. The powertrain itself, so good. The torque that you have out of this bike, I cannot believe this bike is rated at 15.5 kilowatts. It does not feel like that at all. The power of this bike is phenomenal. The throttle delivery is very good. I am very happy with that. Honestly, riding this thing in its sport mode on these trails, it was a little bit too much, and I almost would like to keep it in sport mode but put a smaller sprocket on it to give myself a little bit more top end and a little bit less pull on the bottom and really smooth that out. I think that's something I definitely want to try with this bike in the future. To go over a couple of other pros about this bike, the brakes are fantastic. The brakes are so good. Would never worry about changing those. I love the feel of the levers. I love the adjustability that you have on the fly with the levers. They're plenty strong for this bike. No problems whatsoever with the brakes. The suspension, for what it is, I would say is right on par with other bikes in this field. I think the suspension is pretty good. It's nothing extremely special, but it definitely gets the job done. It's the type of thing you could ride this bike for a long time. You don't have to change it. But if you were to take and change it and put something like Cirrus on this bike, I know it will completely change the overall feel and rideability of this. And I look forward to doing that in the future. But comparing the stock bike as it sits, I would say it's right on par, especially for the price point with most other bikes in this market. There's a few things that I would change about it, especially in the rear end. I think that when it comes to square edges, it's not quite compliant enough. But for an overall bike, especially out here on the trails, I really did enjoy the feel of it. I don't think that suspension was too bad at all. Now, a couple of cons about this bike, and remember guys, it's important to keep in mind that this is a pre-production bike. The reason I'm out here testing it is to give feedback, to change things if needs be before this goes fully production. And there's a lot of minor changes that can be made that I think will go a really long way on this bike. One is the bar bend. I don't like the bar bend. Obviously bars are personal preference for everyone, but that is something I would definitely change. The second one is the foot peg position. I think that they sit a little bit too far forward. Honestly, I feel this exact same problem on the Sur-Ron Ultra B, for example. I think the cockpit feels very narrow, whereas it needs to be extended to get a little bit more leverage out of the bike. So I would like to be able to change the actual positioning of the foot pegs. That is something that the aftermarket will have to attack and do. Another thing is just the feeling of the frame itself, the way that it kind of wraps down. It feels like I need a wider foot peg because the contact when I'm squeezing with my ankles all the way up to my knees, it feels like it wants to kind of kick my foot off. And I'm actually feeling a lot of pressure in the outside parts of my boots on this bike. So I would change the foot peg position not only back, but also out a little bit. And I think that would go a long ways for this bike itself. Those are very simple changes though. I think those would make this bike dramatically better for what it is. But you got to keep in mind the price point of this machine. I think that it is really good. And I mean, if you look at my fully modified race Ultra B, that bike has been gone through front to back to get it to that performance standard. Truth be told, the only things that I would do to this bike, just because I really love suspension, I would do suspension, change the bars, change the foot peg positioning, and then the tires that I have on this bike now are not OEM tires, but they are fantastic. So changing the tires is what I would do. But those to me are pretty minor changes in comparison to what this bike is. I think it has got so much potential to be so good. I really enjoyed this bike out there on the trail today. And I'm really excited to see them push this even further and make this platform even better day by day. And they are working on it day by day. I know that for a fact. So super cool to see this bike getting closer and closer to production and actually coming to market. Let me know what you guys think about this bike. I'm impressed by it. I'm so glad to see more competitors in the mid-size market, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.